Hi, you guys. I am starting a new venture here. My latest book, Annabelle, A Ghostly Texas Tale, unfortunately was brought to press at a time when, I'm going to try to make it through this, when I was a little jaded, a little tired. The self-publishing thing can be a bit of a struggle, but I also have 4 kids, and there are times when you take so many pictures of that first child and even the second child, and then you know what, you get overwhelmed sometimes, and you just run out of time and energy. And I want to apologize to my book, Annabelle, A Ghostly Texas Tale, and I want to share this with you guys chapter by chapter. I'm just going to read it, and you can utilize this however you want. If you want to sit and listen to each of the chapters all at once, that's fine. If you want to listen to it as you go to sleep at night, take it on a family trip across country and you can just hear the whole story, however you want to use it. But I just want to make sure that my fourth-born novel child gets the respect and the time that she is due. So join with me now for Annabelle, A Ghostly Texas Tale. The beautiful cover art, if you can see, was done by Scott Cito of Disney Productions, Disney Studios. Incredible artist. And Yvonne Parks of Pear Creative did the layout of the cover. Isn't it beautiful? She does such a good job. Anyway, we're going to hop right in here. Annabelle, A Ghostly Texas Tale. And just, for parents' sake, so you know, none of my books are beyond PG-13 rating. There's nothing gratuitous. There might be a word here or there because I don't like to sell a character short, but I don't go for over the top with that stuff. So literally there may be a word here or there in this book, but it's nothing that your children probably don't hear to a visit to a coffee shop. Certainly if they're 10 and above, unfortunately they're well acquainted, but just to tell the story the best way possible. But this is completely family friendly. It has a little bit of a creepy element. It does touch on some adult situations, but I am not a gratuitous author. There are ways to get the point across without getting graphic or gratuitous or too heavy for like 8 to 10 years old and up to handle. So one of the things too is about the books I write. I love to write family bonding books, generation bonding books. I love so much to read aloud, and I love to share things like that with my kids. I always have. So that's what I'm going to be doing with Annabelle. Join in with me and share with your kids. And then there are topics that come up that are perfect to discuss. And this is a great way to deal with those issues in a family setting where your kids can hear from your heart, from the heart of someone who loves them and wants the best for them, and maybe not from, a peer who may not have had the life experience to know what mom and dad know. So here we go. Chapter 1 of Annabelle, A Ghostly Texas Tale. And I'm going to shift this down a little bit. So I hope you guys like being read too. And if you want to share this with anybody, do it. It's going to be on YouTube and it'll be easy to access. So the dedication in Annabelle is for my parents, Lynn and Glenda, who taught me love stays, especially when times are hard. Okay, I won't bore you with the acknowledgments, but prologue. Annabelle, A Ghostly Texas Tale by Chana Keefer. That's me. We were strolling along on Moonlight Bay. All the Christmas bells were ringing along the way. Annabelle giggled to herself. She knew those weren't the real words to the song, but she had always liked it better that way. Besides, what could be prettier than hearing Christmas bells as she walked by the seashore? At least, Annabelle thought it must be pretty. She'd never actually been to the seashore, but she could imagine. She spent most of her time imagining these days. When she squinted her eyes tight and imagined very hard, the old house was shiny and full of life again. On a really good day, she could even imagine Daddy was working downstairs and humming that very tune to himself, or perhaps listening to it on his gramophone. If Annabelle imagined even harder, she could hear Mama giggling as Daddy swirled her to the music, causing Mama's taffeta skirts to make that delicious swishing sound. And the parties. How Annabelle loved the parties. Life smelled so good with lovely things cooking in the kitchen, with spoonfuls of sweeties for good little girls who waited with begging cornflower blue eyes until Cookie couldn't resist giving a taste. And if Cookie was in a bad mood, Annabelle would hide around the corner until Cookie turned her back and steal a taste anyway. Then the pretty ladies would arrive in their lovely dresses, and the handsome men would dance with them in the parlor. Mama was always the prettiest, with her bright golden hair glowing in the candlelight and that little dimple by her mouth that was such fun to watch when she smiled. All the men looked at Mama. Someday, Annabelle thought, she would be the prettiest lady at the party and the prettiest dressed just like Mama. Somehow, remembering the fun always made her sad, but she did it anyway. It was much better than opening her eyes to the dusty, messy old house around her. Why did the fun stop? Annabelle could never be sure. One day Mama and Daddy weren't smiling at each other. The happy light went out in Mama's eyes and she didn't get out of bed. Everyone whispered outside Mama's bedroom door. One dreadful night Annabelle woke to the sound of weeping, and the next day the house was filled with flowers. Not the happy flowers in their garden, but fancy flowers dying in big baskets. Soon the house was filled with the stink of those sad flowers. Annabelle put her fingers in her ears and shut her eyes tight. With determination wrinkling her brow, she danced around the room in her lacy white dress with the little pink bows that swirled around her ankles just past the ruffled pantaloons. Daddy gave her this dress for her 5th birthday. That had been a happy day with lots of lovely smells and happy sounds. Daddy had even danced with her to the music of his gramophone. We were strolling along on Moonlight Bay. Chapter 1. In with the Old. The Walden family piled out of the fast food wrapper-strewn SUV onto the overgrown turf and stared through the iron gate in silence. It was the first silence Kate had experienced all day, and if the pit of despair hadn't been growing in her stomach, she would have enjoyed it. After 3 days tramped to the metal confines of their temporary rolling home, despite the adventure of untamed acreage sprawling before them, the rivalry of Kate and Jansen's offspring soon continued. "Come on, Liam, move it!" yelled 14-year-old Rollins. "I would, but your big fat shoes are in the way," retorted 6-year-old Liam. Kate, usually quick to intervene, tuned out the escalating sibling squabble. Good Lord, what had they gotten themselves into? As if the trip across country hadn't been exhausting enough, the thought of months of back-breaking labor to make this historically significant gem livable turned her knees to jello. A comforting arm slipped around her shoulders and Jansen's calm voice spoke in her ear. "If you want, you and the girls could spend the night at the hotel in town. The boys and I can camp on the lawn." Though Jansen's words were only for his wife's ears, the kids didn't miss a beat. "No! I want camp too!" 4-year-old Lily's baby voice cut through before Kate could answer. A chorus of "Cool! I'll get the tents! And can we roast marshmallows?" erupted around her. Although the idea of a hot shower and crawling between clean sheets sounded like heaven, Kate lacked the strength to fight the public outcry. Besides, just a couple hours of daylight remained to explore this 3-story monstrosity. No time like the present. Kate shrugged her consent and received the momentary popularity of "All right, awesome!" from all the kids except 9-year-old Phoenix. While Jansen gave Kate's shoulder a squeeze and trotted off with the other 3 of their 4 like a Mustang let out to pasture, Phoenix silently took hold of Kate's hand and gazed at the old house. With a sigh, Kate gripped one of the gate's iron bars and leaned her forehead against its cold, unyielding edge. The idea of starting fresh and restoring a piece of history had sounded romantic when considered from the kitchen table of their snug Southern California suburban home. Now it just felt foolish and difficult. But 1 second's contemplation was all she could allow, since adventurous Lily was already sneaking away from Jansen, who was lost in the rapture of exploring his new project. Kate grimaced at the thick red rust on her palm and imagined her forehead must have suffered the same fate. Apparently, being dirty was something she would just have to get used to. Kate wiped her hand on her jeans and, with Phoenix in tow, ran after her quickly disappearing 4-year-old. At the top of the house, a tattered lace curtain fluttered, though no breeze found its way through the cracked window. A happy giggle broke the silence of dust motes glittering in the late afternoon sunlight as they fluttered down to rejoin others of their kind in the undisturbed layer of grime on the peeling lavender windowsill. Kate floated through a comforting fog of unconsciousness. Her nose was cold. When she yawned, frigid, smoke-flavored air filled her throat. What she wouldn't give for a hot shower. She felt dirty. The scent of campfire smoke hovered, making the very air feel dirty. She turned her head to view Jansen's profile in the dim gray light. As usual, he slept as deeply as a child, a soft snore escaping his lips. He could sleep anywhere. With a shock of panic, Kate sat up. Thank God. Lily was still there, tangled blonde curls fanned onto the floor of the tent where she sprawled, having kicked free of her sleeping bag. Kate slipped carefully from the warmth of her own bedding to maneuver Lily's fleece-covered form back into her bag. It was a ritual Kate performed any time she woke. Methodically, she checked the beds of her children. There was Phoenix, her thick copper ringlets tamed into a ponytail as she slept in a tight, fetal position as close to Jansen's reclining form as her sleeping bag would allow. How Kate missed the tangled, erratic mess of Phoenix's toddler sleep habits when she might find those red curls at the foot of the bed, hanging off the bed, or, as on one briefly alarming night, under a pile of clothing on the closet floor. With a sigh, Kate engaged the tent zipper in a brief tug-of-war, then slipped out. Kate peeked in the boys' tent. Rollins gripped his twisted sleeping bag as if strangling the life out of it, his Jansen-esque profile scowling. Though his long legs poked out, Kate fought the urge to cover Rollins. She'd sooner wake a snoozing grizzly bear. 6-year-old Liam reclined regally on his back, his favorite stuffed Superman tucked safely in the crook of his arm, dark lashes fanned on the still baby-smooth cheeks. If only she could freeze them all at the age of 6, carefree, happy, and still under the impression the world was a friendly place. Kate re-zipped the boys' tent and stood to stretch her aching back and rub her gritty eyes. Sleep had been elusive. Every nighttime bird's call, rustle of a bush, or restlessly tossing child had robbed her of much-needed slumber. Once again she sighed as the thought of a hot shower. Jansen had tussled with the old water heater last night and had promised warm water would flow by morning. One could hope. The gently waking world, fresh eastern breeze, faint pink tinge on the distant horizon, and tiny birds chattering in the bough of an ancient pecan tree, was severely underappreciated by Kate's bleak outlook as she turned her auburn head and red-rimmed hazel eyes to face this daunting adversary. Was it just her imagination, or did the old house look like it was smiling? With its cracked windows and sagging balcony, the grin was a bit snaggle-toothed. Jansen was the experienced architect, but Kate could easily imagine long columns of building expenses before this eyesore of an historical monument would be livable, much less the old-world showplace her husband envisioned. She crunched across the gravel of the weedy circular drive. Those stones had proved a poor foundation for her air mattress, but she had been adamant about not placing their tents in the overgrown yard. Snakes and vermin were not welcome bedfellows. She had to admit the house appeared more inviting in dawn's early light than it had the night before, when evening shadows had seemed to shroud unnamed pests and eerie secrets. Kate had hardly noticed the deep crown moldings or carved banister Jansen had pointed out. So great was her fear one of the kids would step on a rotten board and plunge to their death. But now, with soft sunlight filtering through dusty, stained glass that cast watercolor puddles at her feet, she had to admit the wood appeared surprisingly solid and smooth. First things first. Kate strode through the dining area to the kitchen and turned the ceramic handle with half an H visible in its white roundness. Brown water flowed into the dirty sink, but finally ran clear. However, its temperature remained decidedly icy. She grabbed the flashlight Jansen had deposited at the top of the basement stairs and descended into its musty depths, only to discover the pilot light in the water heater was off. No need to wake Jansen. She was at least handy enough to deal with this. She struck a match and slowly turned the handle connected to the gas line. The tiny orange flame glimmered as she shut the rusty door. She drew the folds of her hooded sweatshirt close against the morning chill and retraced her steps to the front entrance. As Jansen had noted, the steps leading up to the porch were still sound. He had rambled on about cypress wood and craftsmanship as Kate had chased Lily up the stairs. The chandelier suspended above the entry hall was immense and draped with the largest cobwebs Kate had ever seen. Hopefully, it wasn't waiting for an opportune moment to crash onto her head. Kate could imagine carriages pulling into the drive and richly gowned revelers entering this glimmering hall, now dingy, dusty, and encrusted with broken glass, flaking paint, and the discarded leavings of who knows what. Not for the last time, Kate thought with longing of the energy-efficient suburban home they'd left behind. Well, not so picturesque, with no yard to speak of and surrounded by too many people, but it had been snug, clean, and close to groceries, school, and her favorite Starbucks. Sure, this place showed signs of former glory, but how long would her family have to sleep on the lawn before rotting boards were replaced and the rodent population evicted? With the thought of mice, Kate quickened her pace as she circled through the adjoining downstairs sitting room and study, with a tiny powder room containing an ancient pull-cord commode and a sink. How would their family ever survive with only 1.5 baths? She continued her tour through the breakfast room, which looked out on overgrown acres at the back of the house, the kitchen with its ancient stove and worn flooring, and a pantry/china hutch alcove, leading to the rectangular dining area with yet another ornate light fixture hanging from the middle of the 14-foot ceiling. Cracks snaked forebodingly from dusty gilt edges toward each corner of the room. Careful to avoid walking beneath the threatening antique, Kate completed her downstairs circuit and contemplated the curving banister leading to the second floor. It was a shame rocks had been thrown through some of the windows. Glittering shards of red, green, and blue glimmered on the window seat and across the landing like enticing slivers of hard candy. Kate made a mental note to locate a broom and dustpan before Lily arrived for a taste. The wide stairs split and curved both ways, past unfaded, picture-shaped outlines in the peeling, olive green wallpaper with large gold diamond patterns scattered across its surface. Despite the dust, cobwebs, and animal leavings, Kate had to pause and appreciate the charm of the roomy, recessed seat and large leaded window that faced her as she topped the chairs. What a perfect, secluded nook for enjoying a good book or watching guests arrive below. Her appreciation was cut short by a violent sneeze. Was it possible the air was even dustier than the night before? On her left, she noticed a smoke-like wisp rolling from under the small door they had passed through the previous night. Curious, Kate turned the knob and pulled back the door that popped and protested on its unused hinges. Another sneeze and she started up the narrow, creaking stairs, trying not to breathe. Perhaps the wind was blowing across the floor and stirring things up? At the top of the short flight, Kate coughed in the thick dust and struggled with the stubborn window. With a final slap of frustration against the unyielding wood, she turned toward the small window across the room that looked out the front of the house. With the sleeve of her sweatshirt pressed against her nose, she raced across the room, tripping on a small rag rug stretched across her path. Expecting another struggle, Kate was shocked when she lifted the latch and, with just a slight push, the rectangular wood frames swung out. The pleasant surprise caught her off guard, and as the fresh spice of dew-kissed grasses washed over her, Kate felt the runaway train of her life squeal to a stop. With wide eyes, she drank in the pristine scene of gnarled trees lining the long drive toward the unpaved road. At the iron-gated driveway entrance, the trees marched away in opposite directions, following the line of the unhewn stone wall that lined the front of the property. Across the road, a purely functional iron fence marked the homestead of their closest neighbor. Dark cattle dotted the green expanse between cattle guard and quaint picture of farmhouse, outlying barns, fenced corrals, and a tall wooden windmill, turning lazily in the morning breeze like a snoozing night watchman. Maybe Jansen was right. Maybe this was exactly what their family needed, a fresh start in a rural setting. Rollins could grow into a man far from the city's less than desirable influences, and Phoenix could... A knife twisted in Kate's heart whenever she remembered the way her cheerful, fearless daughter had lost the light in her hazel eyes, those eyes that seemed to have aged 15 years in one horrible night. With a decisive slam, Kate shut off that line of thinking. It did no good to dwell on the past. She needed to be strong for her daughter now. Besides, the angry poison made it hard to think or breathe. Curious, Kate shut and reopened the window that appeared in perfect working order. So what was up with the dust? She turned to view the low-beamed room as stirred debris swirled like fog and cleared, coaxed to freedom out the open window. The room was small compared to the grand rooms below. The ceiling followed the roof's angle away from the dormer window. Tattered, flowered wallpaper hung in shreds from the slanted wall, and dingy lilac paint peeled away from the windowsill, moldings, and baseboards. One lone piece of furniture, a curved, dingy white child's armoire, stood in the corner. Kate crossed to the armoire and tugged on the wooden handle. She jumped and gasped with fright when something popped toward her and she spied a face staring back. With a sob of relief, she recognized her own reflection in the blurry mirror attached inside the door. At her feet lay a tiny, child-sized broom with faded red handle and frayed bristles. She studied the wooden floor that sported random stripes in the thick dust. Someone had made a poor attempt at tidying up. But who? The hairs on the back of Kate's neck prickled and her eyes widened with horror. Lily, she breathed, as a picture of her adventurous 4-year-old wandering the booby trap of a house in the dead of night made her heart race. Kate clenched her teeth and shut her eyes, wrapping her arms tight against her chest as if to prevent it bursting open. Tremors began in her legs and worked their way up until she felt as if a giant dog latched onto her neck with powerful jaws and shook her, threatening to snap those jaws tight and shut off her windpipe. Kate was drowning under wave after wave of despair as she crumpled, sobbing to her knees. The air she tried to suck into her lungs grew heavier, a monstrous chain forged of mistakes, failure, mind-numbing fear, and absolute, bone-crushing weariness. With a whimper, Kate rocked back and forth, a small ship tossed on a hurricane-racked ocean of grief. When the storm finally passed, Kate unclenched a trembling hand to push her hair away from her face as she fought to breathe. How long did the episode last this time? She couldn't tell, but she did know they were occurring more often and with less provocation. "You're losing it, Kate," she said as she stood and faced her own traumatized reflection in the blurry armoire mirror. "And talking to yourself? Another sure sign." With a tired sigh, Kate placed the little broom back inside the armoire and shut the door, hearing a gentle click as the latch slid into place. Realizing the broom incident had drained her already depleted energy, Kate silently pled for hot water for a shower. She turned to exit the room, stirring the thick dust with her sneakers, and noticed her own prints leading through the broom stripes to the window and to where she stood. It took her a moment to realize what was odd about the scene. There were no other footprints.